And I think that we as therapists have to trust ourselves that we are going to pack it up, that we're not going to muck it up, that the therapy police are not going to come after us and knock on our door and be like, you shared personal information. You made it about yourself for 10 seconds.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Heather Gray, a mindset consultant who works with entrepreneurs all over the world. I want you to listen in particular to what Heather's doing in her business that's working for her and that's totally different from what other people are doing. Listen to how she's using only one form of marketing to make her business thrive. Listen to how she's providing services to her clients on demand rather than in regularly scheduled sessions. Of course, you'll hear some of the mindset work she's moved through herself, which she now helps her clients move through. I left this conversation with new ideas for my own business, and I think you will too. Welcome, Heather. I am so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Annie. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're about to dive into. This is just going to be so great.
So fun. Okay. So you are a business mindset coach and consultant, and you help business owners to find their blind spots and you help them get out of their own way. Why is this so important to you?
I think for me, I've called myself at times a recovering therapist, right? Where I had all of these rules in the rule box for how I was supposed to move through the world, the way I was supposed to run a business, and the way I was supposed to operate myself, because I'm a clinically trained therapist and I practiced, private practice for 10 years before I moved to an online business space. And one of the biggest things I had to do for myself was give myself permission to want more and to go for more and to move into something that was a little bit greater than what I already had in front of me. And when I learned how to do it for myself and building something that has value and that I'm proud of, the natural progression of that, because that's what us therapists want to do, is then teach other people how to do it for themselves, how to not play small, how to get out of their own way, how to fight back limiting beliefs, and how to really learn how to make a bigger impact by making a greater income and vice versa, and allowing those two things to be joined. Because I think sometimes people just create stories of what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be living their lives, or they get to a place in business where they're suddenly like they're hitting what they think is their upper limit, as high as they can go. And I want to teach people that like the sky's the limit, truly, that we can dream bigger and to be part of a movement that gives people, therapists, business owners alike, opportunities and permission to dream bigger and to take bigger action.
Excellent. And I love how you just said that that's what we as therapists tend to want to do, is once we have figured something out and been transformed by it, we want to share that. And the way that one way that you get your business out there and communicate with people is something I really want to dive into, is you have a daily podcast. And I just have to pause there and think about that with folks for a minute, that a daily podcast. So podcasters know how much work it is to get an episode out, whether that be weekly or bi-weekly or however often. So doing it daily, you're just going to have to explain this to me, how this happened and how you're maintaining it.
Yeah, it's what the heck am I thinking, right? Well, it started out with when I was building my online business, when I was transitioning from my brick and mortar private therapy practice that I had closed to building an online presence. One of the ways I learned how to do it was by listening to business building podcasts, shows like yours, telling me how to do it, teaching me the steps, walking me through different processes. And I became a podcast junkie. So it was always in my plan to run a podcast someday, to have my own show. I had an advice column years ago in a major media publication, like Ask Heather. So it was like this Q&A style. I've always operated really well from a diagnostic perspective of you give me the question, I'll give you the answer. So I knew that that was going to be the style of my show. And when I finally decided to press go on it, an app got developed called Anchor.fm. Some of you might be familiar with it listening in, but it's basically this, what I call my miracle podcast creator, because all I have to do to record a podcast and publish it to all of the major podcasting platforms is get on my smartphone. I'm literally recording these podcasts, holding the phone to my ear and pressing start and pressing stop. And when I made the decision to start a podcast, I was like, I have to learn how to do this as fast as possible. I had no patience for the learning curve. So my intent when I did it was, I'm going to do this every day until I figure this out. And then I'll pull back. And what I ended up learning is, first of all, I'm obsessed with it. I love doing it. It's really important to me. But also, too, that one of the sort of tenets of my business is that mindset is a daily practice. Not just when we're having a wobble, not just when we're feeling bad about ourselves, but on the good days, on the in-between days, on the I don't know what the F I'm doing days. And so when I really thought about who I am and how I move through the world, it just became inarguable to me that I needed to keep doing it every day. So once I made that decision, it becomes, how do I make it easy? And this app that I use is completely free. I haven't given Anchor a dime of my money. And I get on the mic, I get on my phone, I record the content, and then I can schedule it out. And the way I get my content ideas is from listener questions. So I have like 100,000 downloads at this point. So I've created a large enough following that my listeners help me out by filling my inbox. They give me the questions. And then on a Monday, usually for 3 to 4 hours, I batch as many episodes as I can get ahead of. And this app allows me to schedule it out. And then I use my regular every day as I'm moving through the entrepreneurial world to get content ideas on things to riff about for the days that I don't have a letter in my inbox. So I just gave myself permission to have it be easy, to not have a producer, to not have an editor. There was a weed whacker going on in the background randomly in one of my episodes, and I just let it go, because if I'm going to commit to doing a daily podcast, people are going to get the really human, imperfect side of it. I just made the decision.
Beautiful. And so there's a lot of intimacy in your podcast, because you're breaking through that kind of barrier of, planning a week ahead. You're in the moment. What was that like, transitioning into being in the moment, being vulnerable on your podcast?
I have to tell you, it felt like breathing again. I really, really loved being a therapist, and I was really good at it. And I burnt out from it to the point where, and I say this and people kind of laugh and chuckle with me, but I hated people. By the time I was closing my therapy practice, I just didn't like people anymore. And one of the reasons when I look at that, and I've broken it down and I've done my work and I've had the hard conversations with myself. And one of the things that I realized is that therapy wall of not really being able to show up as yourself, not really being able to say, this is who I am and I am in this space with you today. And this is also what's going on for me, not in a way that's making a whole session about me, but just as a way of connecting. When I gave myself permission to show up as myself with my imperfections, with the cough in my throat, with the weed whacker going on in the background, everything got easier. One of the things that happened in the course of my development of the show is I moved cross country. My husband got a job in California and I was in Boston, and I didn't want to move. I was crying about it all the time. It turned out to be the best thing I never knew I always wanted, and that really perfect rom-com ending. But at the time, I didn't know it was going to work out, and I was a mess about it. And I was crying about it, and I shared it on my show because that's mindset in real time. How do you do the thing on a wing and a prayer that you don't know is going to make you happy when you're leaving everybody you know and you've never done this before? And this was back in December of 2017. Now we're going back a while. And the sort of respect I earned for that, the thank yous I got, the acknowledgement, the role modeling of it just made it so like I have to do this. Like I don't actually have an option because like when you're the therapist and you just always have the right answer or the perfect question and it's coming out in the most modulated way and people act like, we never have a bad day. I think it gets in the way of people making change for their lives when they can see that their mindset consultant and the person they listen to on the mic every day was literally, the story I told was how I was on the Logan Airport bathroom floor crying before the plane was taking off, not sure I could get on the plane. And they got to see me and know that I got on the plane and everything got better. Then they're like, well, why am I so afraid to go on Facebook Live? I can't go on Instagram and tell people about this little itty bitty offering because look at what bravery looks like. I'm modeling it with the hope of taking them with me. It's just lit me up, honestly.
Oh, that's interesting, Heather. Yeah, there's like some of my favorite podcasts are very vulnerable. One I've been listening to, it's not a therapist or a former therapist, is Jen Gotch's podcast. Jen Gotch is okay sometimes, where she's destigmatizing mental illness and talking about her own struggles with mental illness. And she gets really raw, and then there are a few others where people record themselves in true raw moments and then sometimes unpack those moments. I think this is really helpful in that some of the rebels I'm working with, in my mastermind, some people are really coming up against this question of, if I'm sharing myself on a bigger platform and I'm sharing more personal stuff, how is that for my clients and how do I make that adjustment? So I really appreciate you diving into that.
And I think that the way you have to make sense of it for yourself is recognizing that you are going to trust yourself. That I didn't tell. So the example you just gave of somebody in a really raw moment hitting record, I wasn't on the airport bathroom floor holding the phone to my ear saying, hey, dear listeners, it's me. I'm in the Logan Airport bathroom floor. I can't get up. I didn't do that. I talked to them on the other side of my pain. And yes, I got emotional crying about it on the show, talking about like how scared I was, but I had packed it up a little bit. And I think that we as therapists have to trust ourselves that we are going to pack it up, that we're not going to muck it up, that the therapy police are not going to come after us and knock on our door and be like, you shared personal information. You made it about yourself for 10 seconds. Instead, it's going to be like, wow, you lit a path for your clients to follow. You put light so they could walk because before you lit up the path, it was kind of dark.
Yes. Yes. And so it's not necessarily in the moment of ultimate vulnerability, but it's close enough that you can talk about it in a real way. Yeah. Well, tell me, Heather, are you now, what has happened with your therapy license? Are you still working under it? Are you done with it?
Yeah, so the way it ended up kind of working in this weird cosmic way is I was leaving Massachusetts where I had my clinical social work license and I was moving to California. But at the time I had clients in the UK, I had clients in Canada, I had one in Australia, I was seeing somebody in Ireland. So having an international following and making these internet connections with international business owners, knowing I was never going to be like sort of in a position where I had to diagnose mental health disorders again, I decided to let my license lapse. And instead, what I do is I offer clinically informed mindset practice.
Okay, so that's a big deal and a big decision that, a lot of folks are on, kind of on the trajectory to have to make that decision. So did you ever regret it? Did you ever look back and say, oh, I wish I had my license?
The only time I regretted it is I was working with a startup company here in Southern California, and they were looking for a consultation on something. And one of their board requirements was that the person they hired as a consultant be licensed. And so I missed out on a consulting opportunity because I didn't have a license, because it happened to be a sales call for a California business. Otherwise, it's never once come up in terms of the work I do, in terms of my self perception of myself, in terms of anything, because I still have the knowledge. I still have, I'm 20 years post masters at this point. And so what I decided for myself is, and this is a really personal decision for people who hold a license, is for me, my license was a vanity metric. It was the thing that somebody else said, okay, she knows enough. She can do that. And the reality is with my years of experience and the number of times I've done this as a business owner for myself, the number of transformations I've helped clients achieve, I didn't need the state of California to tell me I was equipped to do this. I trust myself to know that I'm equipped to do it. And I trust myself because I've recently done this where I was like, I actually think this is out of the scope of something I can help you with. I'm going to do what I used to do as a therapist when I was following all those strict standards and say, this is outside my realm. I think you need to see somebody else.
Yes, yes. And so I want to go back to the podcast just for a minute, because I am also curious about, and I know folks are going to be curious, how do you schedule this? Like in your day, how do you manage this daily? Do you do them every day, or do you do a bunch and then schedule them out? Like, how's that working?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really helpful for therapists is that we're all used to scheduling our time by the hour, right? And if we were running our private practices and we had 4 people back to back, we didn't do anything else with those hours. Like, we saw those 4 people. We weren't trying to check social media. We weren't writing an email. We were with those people for 4 hours. So just out of habit and conditioning, after running my business for 10 years, I run my schedule as if everything I have to do is a person in an hour block. So on Mondays, I schedule usually about a 3 to 4 hour block of time where I pre-record the episodes and batch them. And then I use the app to schedule them out.
Okay, this is brilliant. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say this before. And I think this is like past episode 100. This idea that we are, as therapists, we are hell or high water going to make it to that therapy appointment and give that person that hour. And so using that same exact mindset to schedule other things that really need to happen, everything.
I do it everything. My entire schedule is what I'm doing each particular hour. So you and I met because I reached out to you because one of the ways I use lead generation for my business, because I love audio so much, is pitching myself to other podcasts. I have it scheduled in my calendar, 3-hour blocks of time when I am going to reach out, draft those emails, make connections, and establish myself. That way, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I've gotten a bunch of no's in, the past week and I don't feel like doing it, it's non-negotiable. It's in my schedule. I have to do it. It's that important to me. One of the things I work with my clients on is, have you set a goal or have you made a decision? It's this idea, like, do you just someday want to get your message out to more people? Do you someday, when it's convenient and you have total time and your makeup's perfectly right and your words are on point, record an episode? Or do you really want to reach people? And I really want to reach people, and people can, substitute whatever their specific goal is and their desire, and you make that time non-negotiable.
A decision. I like that. The difference between a goal and a decision.
That's one of the things that I teach people to do, is to not just do this when it's convenient for themselves, to have made the decision to own that they want more, and when and where and how are they going to get it. So we know it's in our schedule. It takes it out. Like, it takes the mindset piece out of our heads. Then it's not what do people think, and how, like, what do they really want to hear about today, and what's super important to them. Because what I'm experiencing in my podcast, for example, is they will tell me. I did, for example, I laugh at this now, but I thought it was going to be so awesome when I did a 5-episode arc on setting boundaries, because, us therapists, we love teaching people boundaries. The number of emails that I got were like, oh my God, Heather, please never do that again. I don't want to hear 5 episodes of the same topic. So, and when you can roll with the feedback and you can go, okay, folks, I promise I'll never do that again. Okay, you got it, friends. And then just give yourself permission to learn and be human and not take yourself so seriously, but take the work seriously. Like, it's just magic.
How do you get your audience to engage with you? Do you make call outs during the episodes asking for them to communicate with you in certain ways?
Usually at least every other episode, sometimes several episodes in a week. There's also in my show notes, I'll use my email address and say, if you have a question for the show, if you have a comment. The other thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll catch a comment in like a entrepreneurial forum or a group or something, and I'll say, hey, that would make a really good question for my show. Do you mind if I grab it? Sometimes I'll put a call out to my email list. I have sometimes therapists aren't used to having this for themselves, but I have an email list of people who want to stay in touch with me. So I'll put out a call out.
Hey, it's future Annie popping in here. Are you dreaming of working in a new way, making a bigger impact, and increasing your income by at least $20,000 every year, if not more? Join me for the Rebel Therapist 2-Day. It's an online 2-day small group workshop. You'll walk out with a plan to expand your business. Here's what Albert says about his experience. After this 2-day workshop, I feel like I should try to imitate his voice, but I'm not going to. All right. After this 2-day workshop, I'm ready to embark on creating a program beyond the therapy room. I realize this process will be hard work, but it can also be fun, and it doesn't have to be so scary. I'm excited about serving people with a high quality and solid program. I'm on track to launch within a few months. So join us online on Thursday, August 29th and Friday, August 30th, 2019. Go to rebeltherapist.me and click on the 2-Day to learn more and apply. Okay, let's get back to Heather and the innovative ways that she serves her coaching clients. Okay, let's talk about your business, your one-on-one work within your business. So you only do one-on-one work with your clients. And one thing that I would love to hear about is the way that you use Voxer.
Yes.
So you work one-on-one with business owners on their mindset, on getting out of their way. And how do you use, what's the format? How do you use Voxer with them?
I know. I'm about to turn therapists' ears on their edge right now. I'm going so outside the comfort zone and what most people think good work looks like. So,
well, that's okay. That's what they're here for. So
good. I have what I've called a coaching on demand program. I do work, by the way, I do work with groups, but I contract my services out to other people's groups rather than, that's the way, because if people just hear that I'm doing one-on-one work, they're going to put me in that trading dollars for hours camp, when in actuality, my passive income streams just look a little bit differently, and my scaling structures look a little bit differently than what most people are sort of taught and trained to do. Because once I recovered from burnout, and once I realized that if I just show up as more of myself, if I'm just more able to be more directive and less processing and actually physically tell people what to do, step 1, do this. Now you need to have this conversation. Now you need to do this. And when I was able to do the work in the way that felt the most me, I really just realized my passion is in one-on-one work. So like everybody else, I started doing it in the trading dollars for hours. And when I joined the online industry, everyone's like, well, you have to add email support to it. And you have to have these 3-month coaching packages. And you have to do this. So I followed the rules of what I was told to do, because I'm good at that sometimes. And I created this support where if you worked with me one-on-one and you signed up for one of my packages, you had access to Voxer, which is a walkie-talkie app where people at any point in time can just get the free app, ask a question, and within like 24 hours or whatever timeline I set at the time, you could get an answer. And I would get back to you.
So that used to be just like
an addendum service.
Part of it. And then your main service was sessions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm,
and then over the course of last year, when I had so many people who were regularly working with me and finishing up and being like, but could I stay on Voxer with you? Would it be like, so if I'm having a moment, would I be able to ask you? And what I realized is that there is tremendous opportunity for growth and transformation when you get people in the moment that they have a question. They are most likely to choose a new action in the moment of struggle versus in the moment of talking about their struggle, me validating their struggle and saying, yeah, that is really hard. I understand why you're so afraid to do that. This is what I think. And then they can feel better because they talked about it and I validated their concern. They're less likely to change. Whereas in the moment, they're like, oh my gosh, like this is me getting in my own way of my business. I need to reach out to Heather. So the number of people who were keeping me on retainer for Voxer just made it so that at the beginning of this year, effective Q1 of 2019, I offer a coaching on demand program where people still start with me with a call if we haven't interacted before and they're not a previous client, so that I can learn about them and their story, but then they pay me to be on a monthly retainer on Voxer access, so that when they're in a struggle, when they're thinking about something, when they're wrestling with something, they leave me the message. And at a time of my convenience, I get back to them. And what I say to people is that I have my office hours, and I have them set. My clients know what they are. And I say, you get to leave your message at any time. It's on me to respect my own boundary and not check the messages unless I'm working. It's coaching on demand, but it's not coaching 24/7. And then I work with people usually for the average length of time these days. As I start this up, has been 1 to 3 months. They stay with me. They pay the monthly retainer. And as they struggle, as they have a hurt spot, they have this access to me. And what it's done is it's twisted the dollars for hours sort of model on its head, because I can see 10 people inside a single hour now. I won't always have to answer 10 people's questions inside a single hour, but I have the ability now to not just be paid for a single hour, but to be paid 10 times for a single hour, still helping individuals, which is that group model that everyone else is aspiring to.
Yes. Sometimes with coaching, I've worked this way as a client before, where all of the coaching was done over, it was Loom actually in this case, over video. And I help my clients that way a lot using Loom videos, where, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's just an extension on your browser where you just get to record a little video by pressing one button, and it's got like screen share, and then it just gives you a link as soon as you press stop, and you can share it with someone. So that's how I give feedback now. And I find it incredibly efficient and helpful. And I also feel like in those, sometimes the videos might be like 2 to 7 minutes long, but in those 2 to 7 minutes, it's so efficient the way that I'm able to help people with exactly what they have a question about, that I think there's more value there than sometimes there is in a 45-minute session.
The hardest person to convince to do this was me.
Yeah.
Everyone else was, my clients were like, can I just do Voxer? Because they were experiencing the value. I had to change the story. And my clients helped me with it by saying, like, I don't know what I'd be doing if I didn't have this. And then it's like, well, then I'm selfish. And like, who am I to let my minimizing beliefs get in my own way and stop myself from being able to transform the lives of these clients just because that's not what a quote unquote real professional would do. One of the funniest pieces of feedback I got, Annie, is I had this client of mine who was having like a really bad day with a launch that had gone totally backwards. And suddenly she's like, are you at the beach right now? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, I'm having a really bad day and I can hear the waves in the background. Because for me, I literally can take my phone anywhere and sit on the beach and help people.
You get to jump right into your zone of genius.
Immediately. So with life freedom and with less sort of restrictions on my own time for how I move through the world to help people, I have removed every barrier of resistance that I might have for myself, and I'm able to just be present.
This is beautiful. I think it's really, it's lighting me up, and I think it's really going to help people think in new ways about their time, new ways about whether it's using something like Voxer or Loom or not. What is the way for you, Rebel listener, to really find a way to get right into your zone of genius with the time that you have? That's amazing.
It's been life-changing for me, and sort of the way I get to move through the world, because I am only restricted now by the boundaries I placed on myself. And so sometimes, I laugh sometimes. My biggest challenge is usually on Saturdays and Sundays. If I happen to see on Voxer that I've gotten messages, because I set my notifications to be off when I'm not working, so I don't see that I have messages until I'm scheduled to go back. But if I'm really into something with the client and I'm really lit up by something, then it's like, okay, I can't respond on a Saturday because I will be teaching my client that I am available on Saturdays, and I don't want to teach my client that, because I get to say when I'm working. But how grateful am I to have that problem? Because before I joined the online industry, I was looking at my calendar, Annie, and I was like, oh my God, I hope this person doesn't come. Oh my God, I would kill for a no-show right now. So to be so excited by what my clients are doing, that I'm like, oh my God, don't answer on a Saturday. Don't answer on a Saturday. Like, I've reinvented what the work can be. And that lights me up beyond measure.
Absolutely. And Heather, how are your clients finding you?
So most of them, the other reason why I do a podcast isn't just because I love it. It's because it's my lead generator. So most of the people who are finding me right now are through my podcast. The other way they're finding me is through referrals of current clients. So I work with a lot of established business owners. A lot of the people who find me, it's funny, is that a lot of the people who find me are either therapists who hear about this like crazy rogue thing I did with my business and want to learn how to do it for themselves, or they're other online business owners who are getting caught in their own way. So they do a word of mouth thing, because when you hit a certain level of success, you don't want to look down and just take, like the entry level coach. You do want somebody with experience. And so I've built a roster of influencers and successful business owners who I've, really helped and who have benefited from my time. So they refer to me. But, the referral sort of path can sometimes feel like you don't have any power or control over when you get your next referral. So I really use podcasting as lead generation. So I'm always inviting people to a discovery call with me. I'm always inviting people to, connect with me on how to work with me. Anytime somebody sends me one of those emails where they're like editing so much of the personal information out because they think the whole world will listen and know it's them, which always makes me listen. I'll say, hey, like this might actually be, a time to work with me. And then I do interviews like this. A lot of people, in addition to doing what I do, would be doing social media and creating a following online and all of that. I haven't gelled very successfully with social media, so I have really heavily relied on using podcast interviews and my own podcast, as well as referrals to build the business.
Oh, that's amazing. I love hearing that you're focusing in on what's actually working, which is your podcast and other podcasts. And just because everybody else is using social media a lot and spending a lot of time on it, that doesn't mean that you have to do it.
Right. It doesn't,
Fantastic.
it hasn't worked for me. I always dance with it a little bit, and like kind of like the license, actually it becomes the vanity metric, because like sometimes you write these pitches and people don't write back to you, and they don't say yes, or they say thanks but no thanks, or they look at the size of your following, realize you don't have a social media following, and then don't want to talk to you. That it's tempting to do the dance with social media, but what I've learned there is that for me, it largely becomes that vanity metric. Oh, someone liked my post, or somebody liked my comment, but it doesn't really light me up that they liked what I had to say. And so my zone of genius isn't just in the clinical work I'm doing, it's in conversations like this, like actually talking about it, not in a 15-minute video blurb, but having the honest to goodness conversation. So I reach outside my comfort zone regularly, and I'm always reaching out to people to say, hey, I'm here, would you be interested in having what I think is a really important conversation?
And damn, if you think about it, like this episode is going to reach over 1,000 people, and most people who listen to podcasts, including this one, listen to the whole thing. And so, or at least like 80% of it or something like that. So that's really powerful.
And Annie, they're evergreen. So that's the other beauty of it, is that I get clients from people who listen to show episodes I did 2 years ago. I just got one the other day. I did the Smart People podcast in, I think it was 2016 when I did it. And somebody said, oh, I don't know if you're still practicing, but I listened to this podcast episode, and, you know, I now have an on-demand client from that.
This is beautiful. So before we have to go, I want to ask you about if you were to time travel, and let's take this to the time when you started this business. If you were to time travel to the time when you started this business as a mindset coach consultant for business owners, what would you tell the Heather of that time?
I think I would tell her to break the therapy rules, and that it's okay to break the therapy rules, and to define the work in your way. Because I think sometimes that has been my biggest obstacle to getting to where I wanted to be, was thinking that I was breaking all the rules. You know, I said to you before we hit record here that the people who have been, like, we all worry about haters, right? We all worry about critics. The people who have been the most hurtful and the most destructive in terms of their commentary have been other therapists. And like, you know, everybody talks about mom judgment and mom shaming. I think there's therapist shaming around wanting income and impact and all of those things. And so I really wish that she knew in her soul and in her bones that it's okay to do it your way, and that still means you're a good therapist. And to really own that I am exceptional at what I do, even though I do it exceptionally differently. Like I wish she knew that, and that was going to be okay, because I would have, when I think about the income I've been making and the impact I have been having on this demand program, my clients took 68 months. And this was just last year talking me into this. And I wish I just knew from the get-go that there are different ways of helping, and they are all okay, and they're all legitimate.
Awesome. Awesome, Heather. Yeah, I'd like to time travel with you in that, please.
Yes.
So let's see. Anything else you want to add before we have to say goodbye?
No, I think that the biggest thing that I would encourage people to do is get out of your head, because as therapists, that is what we are trained to do. We are expected to have thought this through, analyzed it to kingdom come, processed all the ifs, ands, what ifs, and all of that. And that the best way to learn how to carve a different path for yourself, how to do it differently, is to choose a different action and be willing to see what happens next. Because the Heather you're meeting on this interview is very different than the Heather who talked on that Smart People podcast interview 2 years ago. I have evolved. And I think sometimes when people decide as private practitioners to make a change for themselves, they think they have to have all the answers. I need to know who I'm working, how I'm working, what I'm serving, what my URL is going to be, what my messaging is going to be, my platform, my this, before I can press go. And as therapists, we are trained to that mindset, rather than I am going to move through the world as somebody who is doing this, and I'm going to see how that fits. And I'm going to see if I like it, if it itches, if it makes me feel like my neck is crooked. And if I don't like it, I will give myself permission to change. That is like the biggest thing, is just try it, offer it. That's how reinvention happens, rather than just sitting and getting caught in analysis paralysis.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Heather. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having this conversation and, for putting a name on it and acknowledging that we're all a little bit rebel. It's so refreshing to me. And the thing that I really hope you hear is that the me from 3 years ago really needed somebody like you.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Thanks for listening. Learn more about Heather at heathergrayconsulting.com. That's Gray. You heard how Heather gets questions from her listeners. Well, I haven't done that in a while. Inspired by Heather, I would love to answer your questions again. So what's a question you've got about your business? What would you love to hear me and a guest talk about in a future episode? Please email me at info@coachingwithannie.com and give me your question. Or leave a comment in the show notes at rebeltherapist.me/podcast. I'll see you next time.